Hey Panda Nation, you are listening to the Inverted Gear podcast with your hosts Nelson and Hillary. Join us every week as we take you behind the scenes into our brand, discuss upcoming projects, and conversate beyond the mat with the interesting people we've met along the way.
Hey Max, how are you?
Hey Nelson, how's it going, man?
It's going really well. I have a beautiful snowy day here in Pennsylvania,
Nice.
and I'm gonna jump in a plane in a little bit, and then I'll be in the summer in South America. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, that's insane, right? How that goes these days. It's actually a snowstorm outside right now here, in the just close to the Austrian Alps. You can see the Alps from here, so pretty nice.
So Max, first of all, how do you pronounce your last name? Because I'm not even gonna attempt it.
That's the magical question I get at the beginning of every single podcast, I guess. It's Neukäufler, so don't worry about it. It's a German name. Austrian.
Neukäufler.
Neukäufler. Yeah, it just actually just means to buy something new buyer, basically. That's what it is.
Ooh, that's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah. It's
Yeah, my last name just means bridges in Spanish. Not as exciting.
well, good name though. Good strong
It's
name.
a strong name.
That's how the
So
Japanese would say it, man. Like they would just like say it by meaning. It's a strong name.
yes. So Max, for can you give yourself a quick intro for for those people that are not familiar with you?
Oh man. Quick intro. Um, I'm 33 years old right now for another 2 weeks. I'm from Austria, from Innsbruck in the Austrian Alps originally. Um, and probably try to live a pretty Peter Pan style lifestyle. Wanted to always do, the fun stuff that we do as kids, basically for the rest of my life. So I was always into martial arts, blades, archery, that kind of stuff, and I probably never really wanted to get off that. And so I try to shape my life around these passions and fascinations, basically. And yeah, that's been a pretty weird, rocky road for the last 25 years, but I wouldn't change it for anything. And right now I'm back in Austria after a lot of traveling over the last 15 years. And especially last couple of years was pretty difficult, of course, to travel a lot and pursuing a lifestyle somewhere between traditional craft, handcraft, martial arts, content creation, product design, and yeah, just every day is different. That's the
You
short version.
have you have one of the most fascinating social media accounts, and it goes from you traveling to all the handcrafted equipment and the wooden spoons and the knives, and it's just fascinating because I've met people that are into the same things as you are, but never to that depth. I think like knife making is becoming more widespread as a hobby,
Mm,
and like forging things is becoming more of a hobby. But like the things that you create are just so amazing to me, at
thanks,
least.
man.
Are just
That's
fascinating, and especially the amount that you share about the process,
mm,
about your carvings, and about how you design your tools and the axes. How do you get into all of this?
thanks, man. First of all, and from my point of view, I'm still like super at the beginning, so it's. I think the deeper you get into something, you know that with jiu-jitsu and no matter what it is, having your own brand, family, the further you get into all of these things, the more you feel like you have really no clue what you're doing. And I think I got started with all. I don't know where the fascination came from. I think we all have it to a certain degree in us, no matter boy, girl, growing up. There's these really old things inside us. About nature and tools and stuff to just play with and tinker with and stuff like that. Um, and I probably just got that a little bit more and a little crazier than maybe some other people. I don't know. Um, but I just tried to pursue that and just always was into, I don't know, martial arts and being outside and skills and craft and how people used to live and, virtues that used to be maybe a little bit more prevalent and how to integrate that into today. And so spoon carving was just a really great way for me to use the blades that I was fascinated with, anyways, if you will, Um, and so it just went from there. And yeah, it's devil's in the detail, and I like sharing these kind of things. And yeah, over time it just became more or less like a teaching job, to be honest, because life, the world changes. People get a lot more into craft. When I started, there was hardly anything available as far as information, content, or materials, and try to just pave the path a little bit as far as I could. And yeah, now I feel like more like a beginner than ever before, to be very honest. But yeah, that's pretty
That's
much
super cool. So one of the things I've noticed is you post a lot about this very specific style of spoon, like the Japanese spoons.
um yeah, I guess it's like my how can I say that? I I was fortunate to travel a lot when I was younger. I got into martial arts pretty early, and then by the time I was in my teens, I did. I played American football, but then I got into capoeira, so I went to Brazil. And as soon as that kind of popped my traveling cherry, if you will, I kept traveling for martial arts. Usually, it was first Brazil a bunch of times to learn and teach capoeira. Then in Europe, then back to Japan, and got a girlfriend there, and stayed in Japan on and off for like over a span of about 10, 11 years. I spent about 4 or 5 years there. And it had a huge influence on my understanding of life, but as well aesthetics, and how to integrate um, meaning into your daily life by the way that you surround yourself with stuff. I have this kind of like saying where I'm like, we got to be, as human beings, we got to be kind of materialistic because we lost pretty much all other skills to a certain degree. And so if you have to be that way, do the best way possible and surround yourself with things that have some type of meaning for you, and the story of, they're handed down to you, they're crafted by hand, whatever, sustainable materials, etc., etc. And Japan was a huge thing for me. And I think between the mixes of like spending several years in Northern Ontario, Austria, Japan, the difference in culture, the difference in approach to craft, it just formed my personal like understanding of how I want to shape things. And so yeah, it was a huge influence, but I wouldn't say it's really Japanese. I would never dare saying that it's a Japanese style, because I'm way not good enough to ever claim something like that. But Japanese aesthetics definitely had a huge influence. Yes.
Okay, but yeah, those like I never seen those, and then once you start seeing them, you're on your social media side, like going down the rabbit hole and looking at those, and it's such a fascinating part of the hobby, and then you seeing all the tools that it takes to get that done is so cool.
Yeah, well, like the spoon carving thing is kind of fun because you hardly need any tools actually. Like I got into tool design after I forged a little bit when I was younger, and then realized I'm just like way too all over the place to have like a forge that I want to go to every single day. So I got into designing them based on the little bit of experience I had at the time. And it's an axe, a knife, and a hook knife basically. And the cool thing about these tools is once you understand kind of the principles of using them, um, it just allows you to do such a huge variety of different things. That's just the cool thing about it. Understand wood structure, types of wood, axes, stuff like that, and you can do anything from a spoon to a house basically. It just doesn't change as far as principles. That's the cool stuff. It's just like with jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, principles first.
Principles first. Yeah, that's the point.
And then the second part that I found fascinating about your life is the amount of time you actually spend outdoors. How did that get started?
Mm. Well, it's the Austrian Alps, right? So that means like when you're 2 years old, like you're standing on skis, and it takes you maybe anywhere from 10 minutes to an hour to get to wherever you went, learn skiing and stuff. And we used to go to first elementary school, then high school, just with snowboard or skis, basically. lining up on the back of the classroom. Just grab him, jump on a bus or directly over to the ski lift, and there you go. So you live life outdoors, I guess, just naturally a lot more um, in the Austrian Alps, because there is not that much space between those mountains to put huge cities into them. So you're surrounded by that kind of stuff. And I was just fascinated with adventures, stuff that we didn't have. We had all that stuff, but we didn't have the hunting as much, or the fishing, or the horseback riding, and that. And so I got really into that as a child. Like just books, movies, whatever was available in the 90s. And as soon as I could, I got into that stuff. Started fishing when I was like 3 or something, archery when I was like 5 or 6. The only thing ever wanted for Christmas or for my birthday was pocket knives, and books about how to build stuff, like no matter if it was bows or whatever. And so I just went that route, and I just kind of kept going. And then, the trips became more and more far, and the skills became more and more adventurous, I guess. And, uh, you know, yeah, went to British Columbia, northern British Columbia, worked on a ranch for a while. Just then, came back to Ontario, lived there for several years, crafting knives, spoons, whatever, belts, canoe paddles, working with canoe outfitting companies up north, and finally, like this little, the dream that I had as a child in the Austrian Alps, where a lot of this stuff is not possible. I just tried to constantly do something in order to experience this kind of stuff, and the further the adventures went, the more I realized how little I really understand all of this stuff. And like the learning experiences just kept coming, and the new doors just fortunately kept opening. But I guess it's like with everything. Like I was extremely fortunate, but I guess everybody who is pursuing stuff with passion is gonna find that doors just like magically happen to open. As long as you keep moving, I guess.
That's awesome. Very cool. And yeah, I mean, it's like you said, like starting young and then just keeping that interest. Uh, it keeps you going. I when I was little, I remember my mom had a sewing machine. Those like old Singer pedal
Yeah,
power
classic.
machines.
Beautiful as well. Like with
Yeah, those things are so like now you see them a lot of antique shops like turn them into
yes.
tables because like those like metal frames are so beautiful.
Mm,
So I remember just watching my mom make clothes, and I thought it was like, oh man, she's like doing like Legos, but they turn into clothing. And I was like fascinated by it. And then I would play with like a measuring tape and like, just ask all kinds of questions about like stitching and sewing.
mm.
And I grew up in South America, so like my dad didn't like it at all because that was not a manly hobby for a 10-year-old boy to be
Yeah.
obsessed with. But now, I make a living out of making clothes, and like, I know way more about stitching than any straight man should, I think sometimes.
No,
And
man.
it's
No, no,
like
no.
it's one of those things that, like, yeah, like my father looked at it that way, but yeah, at least being able to understand how things are made, and like, the difference between like inline stitching and flat log stitching.
Dude, it's so
And
cool. It is so cool. Like,
yeah, I mean, like anything, when you start going down that rabbit hole, and like you say, like, man, the more you learn, the more you understand. It's like, I don't know anything.
yeah, man. And like, just the possibilities, right? As soon as you're unlocking one more thing, like one more stitch, for example, right? And then boom, there's just like a whole new world that is like accessible, and it can be really intimidating sometimes, right? Because especially if you're a creative mindset like you are, um, it's just like, oh man, like, am I gonna stick to this? Am I gonna go down that route? No, I could put a different stitch on the lapel of the gi and stuff. Like, oh, should I do that? Is it gonna be? It's just, wow, it's so much, right? But um, I think any type of making is really cool. If you're thinking about it, I mean, I was always fascinated with anything that was gear. You know, no matter if it was leather, I hand stitch all the leather sheaths and everything. I love the stitching part because it looks cool. It is the such a cool part of it, you know. Um, but any type of gear, anything that we use in creating it and making it long lasting, sustainable, and really optimized for certain use, man, it's such a skill and it's so cool. You know, color combination stuff. It's just like it's never ending, man. It's cool.
Yeah, and when you start creating like whatever, if you're like you have a creative mindset and you start looking into whatever you get into, one of the concepts that always comes to my head is just design space. Is whatever I'm making, what are the things that I can change? What are the variables that change here? So if we look at knives, is like what does the handle look like? What kind of metal can I use?
Mm.
How thin is the knife going to be? What how, like what is the point going to look like? And just like the more like I'm yeah, you're the expert in the topic, but like for me, it's just so fascinating. Just looking at knife design over the years, and now like there's so much content being created about knife making now, or
Mm.
and just the fact that you can make a knife out of anything. So like this guy's just like finding an old cleaver from like
Mm.
1900, and like he's making it into a modern knife, and like it's
Mm.
hunk of metal that like all kinds of rusted, and then this guy's just take it and like make a beautiful knife out of it.
Yeah,
And the character that the knife has from being having been rusted for over 50 years.
yeah, man. Like, I just came back from 2 months in Sweden, actually, teaching spoon carving, and just try. I'm traveling around picking up antique stuff. Like over there on a shelf, there is some way more like axe heads that are some of them are over 100 years old than I actually want to admit. And that's probably a good reason for me not like kind of being single lifestyle because nobody would accept that kind of situation. Um, but yeah, we forged Sanmai blades, like 3 layered blades from a center layer of like really high carbon, good tough steel, and then we used outside layers of like wrought iron from the bottom part of a timber sled, like an old Swedish timber sled that they got the wood out from the woods with, from the forest with. And so we kind of pulled it literally out of the moss. It was just rusty, laying somewhere. Took the metal parts off the bottom, and forge welded them on both sides, and like an old organic material that's not made anymore. It's just, yeah, there's so many cool things you can do. And designing these things, I'm always coming from the application side of things. I mean, a gi is probably the quintessential thing to make that has to be optimized for application because it undergoes such like strain. And like living in Japan, of course, there's a lot of types of gi and keiko-gi that I've worn that have completely different application and would be similar to a jiu-jitsu gi for a layman to look at them, but they would never undergo the same strain. And of course, you're living there, you're gonna see a similar keiko-gi kind of design from a samue, like a daily thing people would wear, over like karate to like iaido, which I'm teaching in Europe, out of Japan. Our keiko-gi in iaido, for example, is completely different than a kendo-gi or like a jiu-jitsu-gi. And it's so cool to just find like go from the application backwards. And with a knife it's the same. I call it usually like a blade trinity, like it's kind of a term I'm using in my head. I'm going from the application, and a knife always consists of a blade, a handle, and a sheath. And then you're coming from the application, you think about what you want to do with it, and then you kind of go backwards, if you will. um, and they all
Yeah,
kind of
that's
have to be merged. They all have to like play into each other. If the sheath, then the blade or the handle fails in whatever design or material factor, the entire house of cards, so to say, collapses. So it's really fun, and there's no jack of like all trades and that kind of thing. It's just fun to do a different thing for every application. That's why
yeah. I
there's
mean,
so many axes laying over there. They're different.
so can you talk us through your martial arts journey a little bit? When we met, we were in Austria for one of the summer camps, right? The
Yes,
family camp in
yes.
Austria.
Oh, I swear so fun.
and you were a purple belt at the time, but you were probably one of the toughest purple belts I ever met.
I'm blue.
So
I was blue belt.
I had
I
to
was
ask
blue
you
belt.
afterwards, or blue belt.
Yeah, I was
So
blue
yeah,
belt.
in my head, you were like, I was like, yeah, there's no way this guy's a blue belt. So I had to like ask you afterwards about your training history, and it was fascinating.
Uh, First of all, yeah, that camp was really important for me for my journey. I think it was so much fun. I came out of a very long hiatus. I'm gonna walk you very quickly through the martial arts history because it's just a little bit weird. So I started with judo when I was 6, but like only went for a few years. Um, really liked. I realized at that point already. I really liked being on the ground. And then I got into American football for a couple years, like 6 years in Austria here, when I was in my teens, and that ruined a lot of my body because actually my joints are not really good. But a lot of stuff went. Like I haven't had an ACL in my right knee for like the last 17 years. The labrum in my shoulder isn't existing anymore. I broke my left arm, which is crooked ever since. My neck's out of whatever, and so on and so forth. Tendons in my feet gone from like skating and BMX and stuff like that. And so right at the point when I was like 16, 17, when everything was shot, I was like, yeah, let's get into capoeira. I don't know why, but I just wanted to do martial arts again, and it was the thing. I don't know. So I went through 5, 6, 7 years of capoeira, going to Brazil, and it was just madness. Like I said before, this kind of popped my traveling cherry a little bit. How easy it is to just pop to the other side of the world and be overwhelmed with a different world, different planet. And so then I started going to Japan when I was 21. Met my ex girlfriend there. Wanted to go over there just to study swords and stuff like that. And traveled around a lot. Did a lot of capoeira in different places. And she was doing capoeira as well. So I stayed with that for a while until I realized that it's really not for me. Because in our style of capoeira, people were already trying to kick each other's head off, but still with all of these kind of weird boundaries and stuff. So it's like if we're trying to kick each other in the head, we might as well like wear some safety equipment and do it properly. Plus I really liked capoeira for the acrobatics and getting a lot of good body feelings, or like not body feelings, but like more feel for where you're at through the acrobatics and all this kind of stuff that helped me a lot later. But I always had a little bit of an issue being like the whitest guy in the world, and constantly singing songs about like the oppression with slavery and stuff like that. I was like, I'm having a hard time faking myself into a whole culture, so to say. And I found it almost like appropriating, to be honest, like doing the whole cultural part of capoeira that's very strong, especially in capoeira Angola and stuff like that. So when I was in Japan, we trained capoeira actually in the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym, in the Palestra gym of in Fukuoka. Palestra Fukuoka, which is part of course, Palestra is from Yuki Nakai Sensei. And so after a while, I was like, I might as well give that a try. We're training here every week a couple times, and I see everybody train. And at that time, I was doing already MMA in Austria, Thai boxing, and combat submission wrestling by Eric Paulson. And we went to the Eric Paulson seminar every year in Italy, which is just complete madness. It is complete madness. Like
I can
um,
only imagine.
it's just face cranking your way through every through every training session. So we did like catch wrestling and stuff like that, and we were all like, yeah, never the gi. And in Austria there was no Brazilian jiu-jitsu at the time, as far as I know. Maybe in Vienna, like one Brazilian professor or something, but. And we all at the same time, a friend in Austria and me in Japan, we kind of like got over that boundary finally, where we're like, okay, let's just try the gi thing. That was maybe 2011 or something like that. And we realized very quickly that the face cranking thing was fun, but it wasn't very sustainable as far as health. First of all, the whole neck crank heel hooky thing that we did back in like 2010 or something like that. Um, and at the same time, like little 40-kilogram Japanese people were like just completely disabling me with the gi. And I was like, okay, there's got to be something to that, you know. So we kept parallel training and doing still MMA for many years. I went to Thailand to Tiger Muay Thai in 2013, competed in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu a little bit. And then finally around 2013 or something, we took all the MMA out of our club, and we went straight to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, rule-wise, gi, all that, because we realized it's a lot more sustainable and like a lot as far as longevity and enjoying, you know, it. It was just we were able to bring everybody into the class, girls, young people, whatever, you know, with the Thai boxing, the face cranking and all that. It was a different atmosphere, you know, and we enjoyed Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu just so much. And sometimes in between 2010, 29 or something like that, 2009, I went to, when I was in Japan, I started Iaido, type of Japanese swordsmanship, and competed in Japan a lot, studied in Japan a lot, and then became European representative for that specific type of Japanese swordsmanship, which was my childhood dream, you know, to just swing swords and know how that kind of works, I guess. But it's a lifelong journey. Like, again, every single time I feel like kind of got it figured out. I'm like, yeah, I really don't know how to swing a sword properly, but I teach it in Austria, and I'm I don't know, fifth dan uh, right now.
Have you made your own swords?
No, I haven't. There's no point. Honestly, there's no point. I've done a couple of differential heat treats with Hamon, which is like the type of hardening, differential hardening on the blade. But again, I leave that to the sword making, to the people who do that for a living and out of their cultural heritage, which is really important for me. And I just appreciate that I was able to go and learn that in Japan, and you know, compete in Japan and just live that as a, I don't know. It was just a childhood dream of mine to like really learn that and get down to the core of things. I don't like being a tourist. I like going places and really getting down deep into those rabbit holes. You know, in Brazil as well. When I was 18, I went to Brazilian favela in Salvador da Bahia and like studied capoeira in the favela. Wasn't always pretty, but it was like, you know, as down gritty as possible. You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, no. I feel the same way. Like when we travel, I mean, now we're a little bit more cautious and like more relaxed, and we have kids. But before that, if we went to Japan, we would try as much as possible
Mm,
find like what's it called, a ryokan, like a
mm,
smaller like classic
mm,
Japanese hotel with a little like Japanese futons.
mm.
Hopefully, in like one of the, like the smaller train stations where Japanese people actually lived.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that's a different experience that you're in a hotel in Shibuya and you're
Yeah.
just like, you
Yeah.
know, in a
Yeah.
touristy area. You know,
Yeah.
you
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 don't
get
want
out of
that.
it, you leave your hotel in the morning, you see, like, you know, Japanese people go to work, the school kids with their uniforms heading to school, and then you see all the street vendors, and you can pick, you know, pick up some street food on the way to take the subway,
Mhm.
like everybody does. And same thing, like, you know, we go to South America, we try we usually talk to friends and like figure out where to stay, and like, you know, if we can rent a house, and like just be as close to what it looks like to live there as possible, instead of
Yeah.
just, you know, staying in the pretty part of town in a hotel and only seeing the touristy things.
Yeah, like it's just such a big difference. Like when I was in Bangkok, for example, a friend of mine studied at this like international Muay Thai academy, which is a rough place. Let me tell you, it looks like a I don't know, it looks like in a end time movie kind of thing. Like literally, where like the Y is kind of dangling down like this. You know, it's it was just like super fun to Tiger Muay Thai, of course, is like a really well run you know, thing, like a facility. It's amazing. But then going to these like really gritty places was really cool. And the favelas in Brazil, of course, being guided by the proper people was amazing. And I try to do this everywhere I go. I don't like being a tourist in Canada as well. I lived out of my van, did all the solo canoeing and refurbed old axes with a file for years and stuff like that. I wanted to like do it as hard as possible. Partially, probably because I was really supported when I was young. Difference maybe between that and other people is like when I had all of these dreams of what I wanted to do. I was the most fortunate person to have a family and a mother. My father passed away when I was really young, actually in Thailand in an airplane crash, which was the main reason why I went to Thailand in the first place. But my mom, she really worked so hard for me to do whatever I really wanted to do like that. And she never had this thing where she was like, nah, that's not a real job. Or she always said like, do whatever it's fine, whatever you want to do, and I think a lot of what I was allowed to accomplish in martial arts or craft or whatever it is, if I'm looking back, it's just a long list of people who allowed me to be at places, teach me something, open the doors. There's only so far you can get with passion and talent or whatever. But then again, there's like I was fortunate with my support system, really very, very much. And so that's what I'm trying to do a little bit now. It's like when people message me about what I'm doing and stuff, I'm like, you can do that too. It's not, there's nothing special about me. Just maybe the only thing is that Austrians are very stubborn. So when I wanted to have this and that type of lifestyle, I was maybe just too stupid and stubborn to do something else. So that's probably the quintessence of that. Yeah.
Very, that's amazing. Yeah, and I'm in the same boat. Like a lot of the things I was able to accomplish were because my parents helped me out at the beginning. In Bird Gear, the company started out of my mom's basement, and I didn't have to pay rent for a warehouse for the first 6 months of the business, and I borrowed my mom's van to go pick up the first shipment of geese, and just stuffed it into the back of her van. So definitely having a support system definitely helps. We can't act like we just it just happened because we really wanted it. Like we really wanted it, but we also had like that support system behind us. So I agree with you 100% there.
Yeah. I mean, like you, at the end of the day, there is still something that maybe drives you over that little bit of a threshold or boundary, where someone else who doesn't want it as much maybe goes like, nah, yeah, that seems sketchy, or I don't want to have that kind of hardship or something like that. And the funny thing is we don't really know, like, life's, I don't know who said that, like a person who's much wiser than I will ever be said something like, we live life in retrospect, so now we can say like, oh yeah, of course that happened like this, or that happened like that. But at the point where before that type of happening situation, like we had no idea, right? So now at the point where you are now, you can probably look back and go like, um I would have probably never, if I knew how much hardship that would have put me into, I'm not sure if I would make that decision again. Um, that happens sometimes to me, Um, but
I
I'm
mean,
glad still that I made that decision and I went through that hardship. I had no idea what's going to happen afterwards. So I'm just saying that what I'm trying to say, really, like long-windedly, is that you still gotta want it very, very much sometimes, because some of the situations and some of the decisions are really sketchy and scary and all that. And I'm still working on myself so much, making these scary decisions quicker. Like Musashi said, any decision should be made within like 7 breath time. But I guess the harder the decision and the bigger the decision, the quicker you should make it sometimes like that. And then it's of course great to have that support system around you.
I hear you, and I mean, I look back at my own martial arts journey or starting the business or anything. Is I'm just glad I did it because now looking back, it's like, man, how did they find how did I find the time to get all that training in that I did when I was really into martial arts? I was training twice a day, every day. And then how the hell did I recover from that? Because now as a 35-year-old, I'm like, I don't know about the double session, or I don't know about doing all this extra work.
Mm.
So my advice when I talk to anybody that's really into jiu-jitsu when they're young is like, hey, like train as much as you want as you
Just
can now,
go for it, man.
and you just get it in now,
Mm.
because like especially if you're in college and you have the time
Mm.
and you don't have a ton of bills on top of you, or a career or a family to worry about. It's like this is the time to, like, you just put the reps in and you develop your skill. Because when you are inefficient at jiu-jitsu and you don't have the skill level required to do things very efficiently, and like not being able to use your skills to overcome bad situations at the beginning, you're stuck in bad situations all the time, and you got to use everything you have to get out of bad spots. So that takes a lot more out of you than when you're a black belt and you have this library of escapes just hardwired into your
Mm.
brain.
Mm. Yeah.
Because when you're beginning, oh my god. So whenever I meet anybody that started jiu-jitsu in their late 30s, late 40s, and they have a family, they have a life, they have a mortgage, it's like, man, so much respect to you.
Let me put something on that, because I think at the end of the day, this is still kind of a jiu-jitsu podcast, and I think I probably talked way too much about myself, about other things already. But like, let's bring it back to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When there was a time exactly like that, I want to back that kind of up what you said. I was in university. I never worked in the job that I studied in university. I studied archaeology and biology, and I never worked a single day in that field. So I knew that already, I guess, while I was in university. So I just, finished it. But during that time, I trained about 6 hours a day, between 4 and 6 hours a day. In the morning, I had a good lifting background from like American football days. So I lifted in the morning in a super heavy judo gi. So I did all of my supersets and like heavy lifting and stuff in a judo gi in the morning, because I thought, like, this is so uncomfortable. I should do this every day. I would do like 4 sets of squats in a super heavy judo gi, like with like 140 kilograms, and then I had to do box jumps in a superset in between every set, and it was this super, like, the heaviest gi I could find. And a friend of mine, actually, he had a white gi and he washed it somehow with something red, so it turned out pink. So that gi was not usable anymore. So like, it's the most ridiculous thing. So I was like, I can, like, whatever oil on the bar and stuff like that, I could smear it on the gi. It didn't matter. It just was important that it's uncomfortable. And then I went home, ate, studied as little as possible. I had a day job at noon. I was serving at a Japanese restaurant, like the only Japanese restaurant we had really in the west of Austria, and my Japanese skills helped me a little bit there. And then in the evening, I went early, and then I did some Filipino martial art that I also studied at the time, Palintawak. And then taught usually either the Thai boxing or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class if my friend and like head coach of the club, who was a cop at the time, had a night shift or something, or just trained regularly. So I spent kind of anywhere between 4 and 8 hours a day in that basement down there. And then 2014, like I said, I went over to Canada to work on this ranch in northern British Columbia. So that was my first hiatus of about 3 months without any Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Until that point, I had trained like for 3 or 4 years, like pretty much every day. Sometimes my coach sent me home because I was so broken I couldn't move anymore, but I was still like climbing up a rope or something like that, and he was like, "Just get the out of here, man! Like, just do whatever." But I was about 25 at the time or something, and so after that, I went down to my aunt in California after 3 months in British Columbia, and I checked every gym I could find. That was 2014. Trained with Paulo Giobel and like the Ribeiro brothers, and went to the Mendes brothers, and then there was the Jiu-Jitsu Expo at the time. So I saw everybody, Carlos Sanz and Cobrinha, the Steamer brothers, and I just did the whole Jiu-Jitsu selfie picture California experience, like for 3 months or something like that. And that was basically my peak to a certain degree as far as time invested. And then it slowly went down from there because I kept traveling. I was living in Northern Ontario. There was no Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu at all. Would drive every second day about an hour to get to some gym, an hour and a half to get to a gym, where within a second I was actually coaching there because everybody else was complete beginner. So it didn't really help my own journey too much. Whenever I went to Japan, I would switch between a lot of different academies because the Japanese teaching style at the time wasn't really helpful for me. And then unfortunately, over the years, it declined and declined, just like you said. I don't have a family, but I had to pave a road for a job that wasn't really common. So I had to really find a way to make money, and spend 24/7 on creating, crafting, content creation, photography, whatever it was. So I couldn't just like drive every night an hour to the next gym because I was located in Austria then at a place where there was no Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu around. And this is basically where I ended up now. So every once in a blue moon, I get to go somewhere, Japan or something, train for a week and be sore because the first week after a hiatus is absolutely the worst in your entire life. Like your skin hurts, like you're like shedding a layer of skin like a snake. And somehow when I was like 25, it didn't matter. I could do 1,000 knees against some Thai like boxing bag and it didn't matter. And now I do the same thing and I can't walk for 2 weeks. And so two things I learned from that is get all the training in when you're young because you actually recover. I could train every day. I lost 4 pounds overnight for some reason in afterburn every day, scaling myself. My metabolism was still working. My body was still healing. And then, I don't know, I hit 30 and things changed. So get all the hard work in when you're young. And then when you're older, you can actually kind of draw from that experience to a certain degree because you're actually realizing that those 150,000 techniques that you learn from different coaches over the years are only semi helpful. The most you're really gonna keep with you is not the tiny details, but the bigger principles and the bigger rules behind positioning and body physiology and body mechanics. That's what's gonna stick with you, not the tiny little details that you learn at all these seminars. And I've taken hundreds of seminars with people over the years. I think this time when I trained so much and went through to so many different places and continents for training, I had so many coaches. And I sometimes feel like I should have remembered all of what they said. But what really stuck was not a single hand placement or where you put a finger or a foot. What stuck was, like I said before, the underlying principles. And that's what's getting you out of a terrible situation. Because you're going to be in a competition and someone is applying a technique to you they've never maybe seen before. You're not going to have a technical answer. You only have an answer like based on principles and foundations. You can, like when I teach spoon carving or something like that, which I teach a lot online, I use a lot of body mechanics that I learned in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, in carving, in how to use axes, in how to whatever. But what I teach over there is I don't want to teach people to become a technical zombie. I want them to become creative problem solvers. And they can only do that by understanding the absolute foundations because then they have the boldness to make an answer up on the spot. And they don't have to think about what did like this guy said at that point in the seminar about where I have to place my hand in that situation in order to get out of where my brain never worked that way. Other people might be smarter than me and can remember all of this. I can't. So that's my
Yeah,
take.
I mean, this is a great closing thought. And yeah, learning enough principles until you develop your, is use logic as the word. So you have your jujitsu logic based on all the principles you learn and years of experience. So then every time you're presented with a new problem, you can just go, okay, let's do this, let's do that. And then I think that should work. And then you do it. And then you kind of get halfway through. And then you're like, oh, I didn't think of that. And then next time you do it, you have a better answer for the problem. Same if you're carving a spoon or you're carving anything, it's like, hey, use your principles, try to solve the problem that way. And if it doesn't work, you get to carve a new one.
Yeah, man. One thing I want to share with everybody is the way you keep learning is by not let things just become automatic. If you're finding yourself to constantly react the same way in a situation, it doesn't matter what it is: archery, bow hunting, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, any of these things that I'm doing. Like, the one principle I learned about learning, you're only going to keep learning if you stay conscious. If there's any automatisms in your movement, anything that you automatically always do, you're not going to learn anymore, because your body, like your brain, basically memorized it as a movement pattern, like a fixed pattern that is just going to be triggered and it's just running automatically. Just try to stay conscious about the stuff that you do. That way you can constantly evaluate the stuff that you do. In Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. Just next time you find yourself in a situation, you will be having a better learning experience and a steeper learning curve, and especially a consistent learning curve. People having the problem with plateaus and this and that, you're going to keep learning as long as you stay conscious, and you're going to stop learning in the moment when you just run a lot of automatisms. So that is something that has helped me, and maybe it's going to help someone else out there as well.
Oh, man, that's great. Max, where can people find you online?
You can find me on the Woodsman's Finest on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, website. And that's pretty much it. It's Woodsman's Finest under everywhere. Let me say a couple words, man, about how grateful I am that you let some complete Joe Nobody come on here and actually chat with you for a while. I had such a blast at your seminar and with Hillary at the Globetrotter Summer Camp over there in Austria. I can just really recommend anybody to go to those camps and hopefully have an opportunity to train with you and your lovely wife. You guys were so helpful and so fun, and honestly, to a certain degree, saved jiu-jitsu for me, because I was in a really bad place at that point as far as jiu-jitsu goes. And being at that camp and seeing how you guys are running the stuff and how your egoless approach to jiu-jitsu, making it playful and taking all of this pressure and anxiety out of it, was just really saving it for me. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much. We'll be back in Austria this summer, so hopefully we get to drink some Austrian wine together.
Yeah, we will definitely do that.
All right, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
Thank you for listening, Panda Nation. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Inverted Gear podcast. You can find us at invertedgear.com as well as your favorite podcast app. Don't forget to give us a like, and we'll see you soon.